Okay, welcome to this afternoon session on digital platform and competition, which is evergreen hot topic of competition because digital platform have changed our life in the past few years. They are now a cornerstone of modern economy, and they are changing fast and evolving very fast. We are talking today with our speakers today are two professors. We have Giacomo Calzolari, who is professor of economics at the European University Institute. He is a research fellow at the Center for Economic Policy Research in London. He has published widely on top international journals. He is co-editor of a number of international journals. And his research includes competition policy and economic of regulation. And then we have Özlem Bedre Defolie, who is a professor as well of economics at the European University Institute, holding a joint chair in microeconomics, and she is as well a research fellow at the Center for Economic Policy Research in London. Özlem will first introduce us to a digital platform dealing mainly the floor with Özlem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and also thank you for the organizers for inviting, for being here. It's a great pleasure. And I'm waiting my slides, as you can see. I'm going to talk about digital marketplaces and competition and regulation issues. So my plan is a bit maybe too, ambitious. Let's see how much I will be able to talk about. So I will first briefly start by introducing some important facts that I think we practitioners, academics, and also policymakers have to keep in mind when we think about those markets of digital marketplaces. And they're important business models, like hybrid business model that I will define. And more broadly speaking, I will talk about when it is good to have those platforms selling their own products in the same marketplace that they own. This is what we call hybrid business model, okay? So let me give you first the facts. As you all know, these marketplaces are really mediators of important, significant amount of trade between buyers and sellers, but they have particular terms. In particular, they collect revenues via transaction fees or percentage commissions from the transactions happening on the marketplace. For instance, these revenues could be on, as I said, over the value of the trade, like a percentage commission, or it could be fees for extra services, add-on services like fulfillment. So these fees, for instance, for Amazon Marketplace, Amazon collects on average 15%, but that depends on also the type of the market or which segment we are talking about, which markets like electronics might have different fees than the games, for instance. And app stores charge on average 30%. But again, this is just an average. Google Play and Apple App Store, they have this average terms, but as you know, DMA also imposed them some restrictions on the way they can collect these revenues. Now apps can access alternative payment channels, and there is this ongoing, indeed, conversations or exchanges between Apple and the European Commission on this topic, which just happening currently. Okay, most of them run this hybrid business model. Again, they have their own products or services on the same marketplace, competing against third-party services sellers or product sellers. For the Amazon, like private labels, Amazon Basics, but also for Apple App Store, they have their Apple Music competing against Spotify. Okay. And many examples, I am just talking about the main players because they are the ones that generate the main concerns, as you know. The main concern of running this type of hybrid business model is the as well established statement by Elizabeth Warren, being the referee and the player at the same time. Okay, so this kind of gives a conflict of interest, and the standard theories of raising rivals' cost arguments, and I might want to just charge higher commissions to, on my benefit of my own product sales to increase my own margins on the same product competing against my rival, okay? But also there are other aspects, like for instance, does the entry of the platform might distort third-party sellers' incentives to enter, so innovation. And also, there might be some practices, in particular, if you think about digital marketplaces having a significant impact about what people see as choices, or first-rank products having a significant advantage in terms of consumers clicking most often and buying most often from these things like buy box or recommended products. So they have very significant power influencing what people buy, and that gives them obviously market power, but also they might distort and steer consumers towards their own products, okay? That's what we call steering. And again, there have been cases, European Commission Spotify case, Epic Game lawsuits against Apple and Google Play, but there's another concern, which is, should we regulate them like telecoms? Should we cap those commissions that digital marketplaces are imposing on their third-party players? Because they are found excessive in the case of Spotify. And there is a final, discussion about ex-ante regulation, and there's implementation in Europe, right? So Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act since July is in practice. So already those gatekeepers are assigned, and who are the gatekeepers they know, and now they have to fulfill. Okay? In those regulations, they are mostly not those gatekeepers. The big dominant platforms are not able, or they are not allowed to do certain practices. For instance, for app stores, they have to allow alternative payment channels to their app providers, right? And Apple basically changed its terms, but that did not please European Commission. And in June 2024, European Commission opened a new investigation of Apple's reaction to DMA, okay? So there might not be competition cases anymore because we have ex-ante regulation, but there's this ex-post implementation back and forth probably we might see, and hopefully, that will create a bit more clarification about how to implement. Because implementing a law like regulation like DMA is challenging, and I found this paper interesting, which talks about effective and proportional implementation of these rules. And they put very brief bullet points I want to emphasize. Regulation has to be clear about what those obligations are, not just by stating it clearly, but also in practice, right? But also they have to comply with the obligation, but you have to be able to assess whether they comply with those obligations, okay? So this should be very, again, in practical terms, something that could be validated. Even though third parties, the parties have to prove the European Commission that they comply, someone at the Commission has to be able to check and assess this compliance. And proportionality, okay? They should avoid harm, but they should not distort other areas like consumer choice or innovation, okay? Of course, these are big words. In practice, we might need to say a little bit more, go deeper into one topic and talk about it. This is what I'm gonna do, and talk about self-preferencing, okay? So this is coming from Article 6.5, talking about why gatekeepers, or what are the obligations of self-preferencing on the gatekeepers, so they shall not treat more favorably in rankings or related indexing their own products or services at the disadvantage of third-party products or services, okay? So you can read it, and it makes sense, but if you ask the question, like what is the subject? First, gatekeepers or the dominant platforms are the subject to this regulation if they have gatekeeper power on their core platform services, okay? And those third-party products that are also involved, so that I should not treat them at the disadvantage, so I should not give the preferencing towards my own products or services. So that means Amazon should not treat its own products at the disadvantage of the third parties, okay? But what does that mean, putting in a disadvantaged position when we are talking about Amazon is already taxing their transactions, okay? So what is the scope of this disadvantage? As an economist, it was not clear to me when I was reading those self-referencing regulation, and I'm sure the parties might come and also say, oh, this is not clear and this is not self-referencing, and we will tell you why, okay? So this basically goes and talks about challenges of implementation. So what does self-preferencing include? What is the definition in practical terms? And to what extent fees collected by those marketplaces could fall under subject of Article 6.5, okay? So these are the fees for instance, could be for service fees, like fulfillment, or could be sponsored link fees, right, the advertising fees, or it could be commissions, percentage commissions. Because if you think about economic terms, when I charge my rival a commission, I am putting my rival product at a disadvantage because it has to pay higher costs than compared to my product, right? And how to disentangle self-preferencing from legitimate differential treatment, and what kind of evidence we need as necessary to prove that there is a bias. And can a bias be demonstrated when we have AI-based self-learning algorithms? I believe that Giacomo will go and focus further on that topic, so I will skip that. Okay? So what does self-preferencing include? So we have to be a little bit more clear. What economists can do, we hopefully try to be a little bit more going and identifying what is self-preferencing in practice, how to provide this evidence, and quantify the effect, and evaluate certain measures, implications on the markets that we are seeing, okay? So let me first start by the incentives. That is, as an economist, I would ask first, does the platform have an incentive to do self-preferencing to start with, okay? So Chicago School arguments would say they have their own trade on the platform, they should care about their consumers because they want to generate traffic. Why would they do something that would harm that traffic? So per se, it is not clear why would they give preferential treatment to their own products if the third-party products are better or better valued by consumers. Because at the end of the day, they collect commissions from those products. So it is not clear that they will always have incentives. And at the same time, as most of you experience when you go to those marketplaces, there's a big competition, and which is good for consumers. So they create competition in each market domain, in each market. So all these sellers selling different products generates competition and lower prices and more variety, right? So offering their own products might intensify this competition. So for instance, Amazon-owned products could be labeled or brands, or it could be private labels, could intensify competition against big third-party products, so lower the prices. And how does this differ from private labels in retail? And there are a couple of academic papers that I put here. They talk about the key differences. The key differences are ownership, okay? Amazon or Apple or Google Play, they do not own those products or service or apps that they are intermediating, right? So what does it mean when they don't own them? Then there is no cost of production or the manufacturing of or the buying from the upstream market. So their margins are basically that do not include those costs, and they just tax the revenue. So when there is no ownership, that means also that they cannot control the prices directly, but indirectly via the commissions. Okay? And that changes the business model. Okay? In the old world, if you remember, brick and mortar franchise model sounds a little bit like the business models we see in the Amazon marketplace type of environments, where you have a franchisor which is basically collecting commissions from the franchisees, right, or sharing the revenues generated by each location. Okay? And banning self-preferencing will affect the commissions or the fees they charge, okay? So they will react like Apple reacted. So Apple has to allow third-party apps to have access to their alternative payment channels, and they reacted by changing their payment plans, okay? So we have to be also aware of the fact that this reaction happening endogenously, okay? So is hybrid mode good for consumers? Well, if you look at the academic literature, evidence or both in the theory side and also empirical side, it is mixed, okay? It's not per se clear, it's always bad for consumers. And they outline conditions that determine it might be bad depending on the level of differentiation in the market and the type of the commission fee. Is it a commission, percentage commission, or a unit fee? Unit fees are not widely used by those marketplaces, but percentage commissions have a different properties than the unit fees. And what type of entry we expect in those marketplaces. Is it an elastic entry? What does it mean, elastic entry? Anybody can go and sell on Amazon Marketplace, but anyone cannot post an app on Apple App Store, okay? So that means already Apple's entry is not that elastic, okay? Even though you think there are zillions of apps, putting an app on an app store of Apple is a very complicated thing. So there are some endogenous barriers to entry created by the platform, okay? And whether there is imitation of third-party innovation, this was another point, you know, that Amazon case is involved, whether Amazon uses third-party data to innovate and imitate what they have as a product and then basically self-preference and lead to the death of the other innovative product. Okay, so this is another important aspect to think about, and self-preferencing, whether there is self-preferencing or not. So these are the criteria to decide when hybrid platforms would be harmful or not. Okay, and app stores like Apple, for instance, if you think about a consumer which spends, you know, think about yourself, you spend to do many different things on your devices, so you do not only buy one, you know, product, but you do multiple different things. What we call economies like complementary markets that you are interacting with. You use many different apps, okay? So complementary part of these app stores is much more important than if you think about marketplaces. When I go and buy something, I am interested in, say, running shoes, and I go to buy running shoes, okay, at that point of time. So it's more like a market of substitutable products when you think about the decision-making of the consumer. So that has an aspect. So for instance, if Apple introduces its own products, I have a very recent paper that we show that actually that could be good for consumers, because then Apple products actually increase the demand of the other apps, and that would also help other apps and the consumers of the other apps, okay, because of the complementarity. However, if you have substitution being the main driver of the demand in a given market, then it's not necessarily true. So this is the example of the Amazon Marketplace. And let me a little bit open up these aspects that determine when hybrid mode could be bad or good. How am I doing in terms of time? I'm already off. How much? Good? Okay. So I said the first item was whether I talk about differentiated product or homogeneous. Of course, we all know what differentiation means, but when you think about search of a product on Amazon Marketplace, which level we are talking about? So this is a slide maybe some of you have already seen from my presentations. This is the product level search on Amazon when I go and type Bluetooth speaker, okay? So this is the first page. You have differentiated products of different brands appearing in the first ranking, okay? So when there is a hybrid mode, that means that the Amazon-owned products, in that case, there is no private label. So it could be third-party product owned by Amazon, like Amazon being the retailer, could be in one of those, okay? So then Amazon, if it sells its own product there, it replaces or it puts one product out of this first page, okay? And most people buy their, you know, what they look for from this first page search. And if you go, for instance, click one of those items, like for instance in this example, let's click the GBL, you see who is the seller. So here you don't see who is the seller, okay? You have to click and see who is the seller. In that case, seller is Amazon. So GBL is a branded product, but in very tiny letters, you see that Amazon is a seller. But there are also other sellers selling. But the most people go and buy from the first seller, which gets the buy box, right? So I think there are some statistics. Some people claim they don't know where those statistics come from, but I was sitting in a presentation of an academic who was cited for giving that statistics, and he said he has no idea where the statistics come from, so it was interesting. but I found on the internet across different, both policy reports and also the reviews of those literature, 88% of the people buy from the buy box. They don't go to the alternative sellers, okay? So, but then if platform enters at that level, it 88% of time replaces the product. And this is what I call homogeneous. Why? Because GBL is the same GBL, but it's sold by Amazon versus third-party seller. You can say, yeah, but Amazon might have better delivery options. Yes, but Amazon also sells its fulfillment. So if a seller has the same fulfillment, and it's literally homogeneous product, okay? But in the previous page, it was more a differentiated market, the first page, okay? So what the theory says is that if we talk about introduction of Amazon-owned products, if they are happening at the buy box stage, so Amazon basically gives self-preferencing to its own products, then Amazon most of the time does it in the benefit of consumer. They only do it if they are better in terms of cost, of delivery, efficiency, and that is good for consumers, okay, in most cases. It might be in some cases bad, but very few evidence of these papers talking about why it could be bad. That could happen if there is self-preferencing. So that means that actually, Amazon tried to give preferential treatment to itself, but even that wouldn't happen under, for instance, if Amazon product is very less efficient than the other products. So there's a very tiny range of parameters, or I'm talking about in model terms, that can happen, that there might be self-preferencing. In those cases, it could be bad. But again, if you think about the imitation, if there's innovation and imitation, yes, it could be bad. So the behavior of self-preferencing imitation could be bad, but the behavior of selling own product per se is not. Most of the times it's good, okay? But if you ask the same question about the heterogeneous products or the differentiated market where people have different tastes for different products, then the theoretical papers have diverse results, okay? So I have a paper which shows that it harms consumers by raising final prices and lowering variety on the marketplace, because platform has incentive to raise commissions on third-party sellers when it has its own products on the marketplace. It is the raising rivals cost argument, and what we call in the paper insidious steering, because you are steering via the higher prices of your opponents, okay? And it could be also good in other contexts, but again, it depends on what are the underlying assumptions of these models, okay? Let me just very quickly talk about empirical evidence, because I think, again, for this crowd, it could be interesting to see what is done empirically, given that this data is nearly impossible to obtain from those private parties, in particular, they are under regulation now. All these studies come from one company which collects what you call the internet data, web scrape data. And this is a tiny company built in Stuttgart in Germany, financing or giving all the data to the research. They are not like doing it for the benevolent ways, but they are basically selling membership, that you can get membership and access to their IPAs and get the data. I also have data work using their data, okay? So none of those, except for the Crawford et al. Paper, none of those is the first-party data coming from those big digital marketplaces, because they do not allow researchers, unfortunately, to get this data. So one of the things hopefully might happen with DSA is to get access to data if researchers can make a case that data is essential to evaluate impact on consumer welfare. Okay? So this paper's main conclusion, there is self-preferencing on Amazon. So there are a couple of papers making this point, especially in buy box. But it benefits consumers in the short run. Short run meaning if you don't account for entry effects of the third-party sellers, okay? Which is also consistent with the theoretical models, that when they don't consider variety effects, they find it good, okay? But in my paper, again, that I mentioned, we have this variety effect that endogenous seller entry depends on the prices they expect on the marketplace, and that would be the distortion, additional distortion to the Amazon entering with its own products, okay? So it could be bad in the long run by reducing the variety on the marketplace. And then there are benchmarks, which is very important to keep in mind. If Amazon, say, banned acting like marketplace, what is it gonna do? India actually implemented the ban on Amazon owning its own products in the B2B business. And Amazon said, okay, I'm not marketplace anymore. They basically kicked out all the third parties. So I'm not saying that they might do this in every market, but we have to be careful and try to understand what will be the counterfactual if we ban hybrid mode, okay? Because these type of models talk about its impact, and they have a benchmark when they talk about its impact. For instance, they have this, if the self-preferencing benchmark is randomly showing the results, then self-preferencing is good. Yeah, but random rankings are not the benchmark, right? So we have to be careful when we are reading also this literature, and all of these papers did the analysis at the level of the product, or what I call ASIN level, which is the Amazon Standard Identification Number level, where the products are homogeneous. None of these papers considered pure differentiated demand estimation and try to understand this differentiated demand competition on the first search page of Amazon. Because in order to do that work, you need a lot of data, and none of us have that data. Okay, so that's where we are standing in terms of the empirical literature. I think I have to conclude, yeah? Okay. Maybe 2 more slides on this as facts could be interesting. If you look at the history of fees on Amazon Marketplace, the green on the left figure is referral fees, so these are commissions. They have been constant over time, okay? But we have fulfillment fees and advertising fees, so the fulfillment is red and advertising is blue, raising over time. And fulfilled by Amazon, which is this fulfilled by Amazon, the red curve, the blue one, fulfilled by Amazon is increasing. So that means actually maybe the market power of Amazon as a platform is arising not on the commissions. We have to be careful, but the fulfillment fees or other advertising fees are going up. Given that how much the marketplace has impact on what people see as a choice set, even though commissions are, very constant over time, we shouldn't conclude that, oh, there's no evidence that Amazon raises commissions, okay? So they have alternative ways of getting revenues from those players. Okay, I don't have time to go through this, just let me conclude. So what I wanted to just highlight during this very short talk and hopefully point out important aspects, which is the implementation of DMA, why we have to be, clever and careful in exactly outlining practical ways of assessing the compliance in the implementation, and in general, talking about self-preferencing. So it seems to be right that those platforms, when they sell their own products, might harm consumers by self-preferencing. So this is the common, the theme getting out, and imitating third-party product innovation. But it is not clear that selling just own products is bad per se, okay? So we have to look for behavior of exploitation. And we need to clarify coverage and the measurement of those impact of these practices. And banning one practice, for instance, if I want to ban hybrid mode, that might lower commissions, but it might also change the full market structure, or we can have a situation like Apple, when Apple is forced to open up apps to go and do their transactions on the third-party channels. Apple reacted by changing its commissions in a way that not just lowering them, but offering the menus. And they are, these companies have very good teams of practitioners, both economists, lawyers, and computer scientists, who come up with very creative solutions. So now there will be a back and forth between the regulator and those gatekeepers trying to see the compliance. This is all I would like to say. Thank you very much. Looking forward to questions.
while we're waiting for the preparation of the slides, let me first start thanking for the introduction, thanking for the invitation. I'm honored to be here. I'm very happy that we can have this European University Institute package on digital markets, and I think it's a good sign of a sign of vitality, let's say. Okay, so, well, although it's nice to see the room full and people standing up, in fact, there are some free seats here. So, okay, so maybe what I'm trying to do now is to show you how an important and novel technology like AI may actually derail some of our regulations, some of our approaches, as Özlem was mentioning before, and you'll see some connections between the two presentations. First of all, AI is not only ChatGPT. It's an important technology, it's a general purpose technology that is affecting our lives already quite deeply in many different environments. You see here some environments where we have actual applications already operating in our market. So you go from healthcare, drug discovery, of course, language, ChatGPT, autonomous vehicle, but also more related to what we call markets in a stricter sense, finance, information curation will be part of my presentation, that is recommended systems, and algorithms that are able to quickly adapt to changing market conditions like pricing algorithms. So I have a kind of heroic plan, because I would like to discuss with you briefly a couple of points that are, in my view, quite important. So AI is already operating in markets and is delivering markets application I was mentioning before. It's a general purpose technology, like, I think nowadays we can say, like electricity. So it's a technology that gives you the ability to improve on your performance in terms of predictions. So if you ask yourself where AI is going to be important, the answer is everywhere, because in everyday's life, we need better predictions. So the question for us, I think, is how these better predictions will affect markets. Then, of course, there are many other implications of AI in terms of market outcomes, on macro effect, inequality. I will not discuss them, of course, today. And the second point I want to discuss briefly is AI as an industry itself. It's going to be a very important part of our production structure, and hence it's important that we understand how this AI market works. So essentially it's based on three typical inputs: skilled workers, those who invent and code the algorithms, data, and computing powers, or cloud computing. And then the output of this is the models, the algorithms, and ultimately the ability to make predictions, I was saying before. Okay? So let's talk briefly about algorithms. Is there any new stuff here under the sun? If you think about some industries like hotel or airlines, these companies were using algorithms since decades, in the past centuries, by the way. Now, there is a substantial consequential difference with AI, which is in the nature of the algorithms. AI algorithms are designed to learn autonomously. So a coder would not instruct the algorithm what to do, when to do, how to act. It will instruct the algorithm how to learn out of the environment. The environment could be a market. Okay? So then the algorithms autonomously learn behavior. So the behavior is not coded. This is the big novelty for market applications with respect to standard algorithms. And what is interesting, and I think it's another very important property for people working on competition policy, is that some of the properties that the algorithm some of the behaviors that the algorithms learn autonomously, they were not even conceived by those who designed the algorithms. So it's a discovery. We will discover that algorithms have learned to do some things that we did not expect. This is what computer scientists call emerging properties. So a few words on some market applications and implications for competition. Here I'm completely biased because I'll tell you a couple of words on some works I've done with some colleagues in the recent years. So the first application is AI for pricing. In digital markets, the markets that were discussed by Özlem before, most of the prices that you see nowadays, majority of it, are set by algorithms nowadays. And you also have an entire industry that is growing up, which is called repricing industry, which is a very fuzzy industry to be studied by certainly economists, which is the industry of software companies who design and offer these pricing algorithms to be implemented into digital markets. Okay? And you can buy services for pricing at very low price. You see here a monthly fee of a few dollars. So now the question is, what are the consequences of algorithmic pricing in markets? Are they pro or anti-competitive? What types of algorithms are these companies offering to sellers in digital markets? And well, so I have some answer to those questions. Not all the answers are available, in my view, at the moment. I somehow produced some research on this in the last 6 years, of course, with with co-authors and with many scholars who were engaged in trying to address these questions. And I could say that at this point, 6 years of research on the topic, we can say that algorithmic pricing can lead to price increases. And there are several reasons for this type of outcome. So let me be clear here. It's not a systematic implication. It's not systematic implication that if sellers use algorithms, this would imply high prices. What I'm saying is that it is a significant possibility. And for several reasons. One is autonomous algorithmic collusion, which would be an example of those emergent properties I was mentioning before. A software company designed an algorithm to self-learn in the market. The algorithms operate in the market and autonomously learn to tacitly collude. So I have a paper that shows this outcome with no human intervention, in the learning process of the algorithm. Now we know that there may be, in this learning process, there may be what we call traps on high prices. This is a phenomenon that shows that algorithms may not learn as effectively as they should be, but in the end, they are trapped to high prices, which is a problem. Algorithms are a form of commitment, and we know in economic theory that commitment may lead to high prices. And then there are algorithms that are used in the way that is called hub-and-spoke approach, which you may know are under discussion in the US for important cases, that may actually be a mean for increasing prices, an approach to increase price. Now, well, you say, if algorithms are so bad, let's look into them. The problem with modern algorithms is, this is the meaning of this picture, is that looking into algorithms is very complicated, close to impossible. So you cannot open up the algorithm and look inside, because this is what you would find. That's a kind of a joke, but this is an attempt in my research to understand what is written in the algorithm. It's a problem. It's actually a general problem that computer scientists know very well, which is the problem of explainability of artificial intelligence. Us humans may have really troubles into understanding what an algorithm has autonomously learned. Now, is this relevant for policy? Well, In my view, yes, because just mentioning the first potential problem I was mentioning before, autonomous algorithmic collusion, here I'm quoting what is the economist definition of what is tacit collusion. Is related to the great work of Joe, is in this room. And the difference between the notion of tacit collusion and the approach that you would have on collusion in a real-world antitrust case. And the clash is such that autonomous algorithmic collusion, since would be really autonomous, not foreseen by those who decided to use the algorithms, shows no intention. If there is no intention, you know that this type of collusion currently would go, in a sense, unnoticed or free. Yes, they are very relevant for policy. So I think we are really entering into a brave new world where policies should be at least reinterpreted. I'm not saying that we need new policies, but should be reinterpreted in a way that would allow us to cope with this phenomenon. So there are several approaches, several proposals, whether we may want a pre-approval of the algorithms that are used in the market, like, for example, we do with drugs. This is kind of problematic. There are some solutions. Maybe we can use AI to detect collusion by algorithms in market. That's a possibility. Certainly, it's very interesting from the point of view of an academic scholar, very interesting and quite a bit of work still to do. Second example I want to mention on AI in the market is recommendation systems. Now, thinking about the digital markets, I'm sure you have experienced yourself the ocean of opportunities and options that you have. So if you look at Amazon Marketplace, we're talking about several hundred millions of products you may want to buy, or you have the possibility to buy. The number of songs on Spotify, we're talking about 90 million songs, 26 billions of videos on YouTube. So how do you decide which songs to listen, which movie, which product to buy, and so on and so forth? The answer of computer scientists is in the recommendation system. These are software that are exactly designed to provide personal recommendation. And the key point here is personal, meaning that the recommendation I receive is, in any of those platforms, is different from the recommendation Özlem would receive. So this is an example, going back to Amazon Marketplace. This is a snapshot of the Amazon web page shown to one of my co-authors, and you see it gets some recommendation. We don't know why it gets this type of recommendation, but that's not mine. And there is a degree of personalization. That's why this picture is kind of worrisome, but that's it. Personalized recommendation are changing our world, our lives. They're already shaping our decisions. Netflix, 75% of the movies that people watch have been recommended individually to persons. 35% of the pages that people look into Amazon have been recommended. 40% is Spotify. 60% of those 26 billions of videos in YouTube have been recommended individually. And so, as you can imagine, this is a consequential impact of a software tool into markets, into people's behavior. And then it came with a lot of discussion, not only on the academic side, but also quite immediately, I would say, also on the policy side. I just want to mention a sentence that you find on the DSA. Large online platforms may need to mitigate the negative effects of personalized recommendations. So when I read this sentence, I was kind of really shocked, because we don't have good research at the moment showing that recommendation systems are generating negative effects in markets. Okay, so we did some work, with the idea to see how the presence of a recommendation system affects the behavior of consumers in a market, and somehow what you see here, we are distilling a demand function and comparing what would be the demand function without individual recommendation and with the demand function where each individual consumer is subject to some recommendation. Okay, and you see, you go from the blue demand function into the red demand function. So it's a long story. There are many different facts going on that generate this demand transition. What I think is interesting is that if you then ask yourself, what are the implications in terms of the prices of the products where the demand function is affected in this way, then you discover some interesting things. And the discovery we made was that this change in demand function tends to increase prices. In other terms, sellers anticipating that consumers' demand functions are mediated or intermediated by recommendations, they tend to increase their prices as an equilibrium outcome. But this is not necessarily bad for consumers, because we also discovered that recommendation systems in providing individual recommendations are extremely effective, meaning that nowadays, I'm sure you have in your mind stories of 10 years ago, 5 years ago, recommendations that were kind of crazy. You bought a pair of shoes, and they were recommending you exactly the same pair of shoes after an hour. That was the infancy of recommendation systems. Nowadays, it's a completely different thing. The impact of these tools is enormous because they are very effective. So they have a positive match value, we say, which increases consumer surplus. But they also come with this effect on price increase as well, and the combination of the two is typically ambiguous, okay? Which requires some additional, certainly some additional investigation. And on this, we also, given this framework, we also somehow were able to dig into the implication of what happens if a seller has the ability to manipulate those recommendations, which speaks to the problem of self-preferencing. Now, if you combine all these effects, it turns out that even if you have the ability to manipulate the recommendations, you may not have the incentive to go very far into manipulation for several reasons. One of the reasons is that the more you manipulate the recommendation, the lower would be the prices. And if you are a seller, this is not good for you. Now, what about competition in the AI industry? We want to leave a few minutes, actually some minutes, for discussion. So I will be very short and brief here. And just to mention that, as I was referring before, this AI industry needs three key inputs. Data, data, computing power, and scholars, those who materially design the algorithms. Now, the industry is attracting many talents out of universities in a way that is unprecedented. This is a first fact. It's not necessarily a bad implication. So it has not necessarily a bad implication, but it's an important fact. Another key input, which is CPUs, in particular GPUs, is a very concentrated market currently, and this speaks to one of the factors which is computing power. Data are typically concentrated on digital platforms that Özlem were referring to. So here I want to mention what I think is important. We are entering into what I think, and I know I risk to be too much emphatic, but I think is really a new revolution, close to industrial revolution. I know that I'm risking my career here, but the important novelty is that this is built in an environment where there is a lot of concentration in many of the inputs that are necessary for this technology. Most of the data are in the hands of the digital platforms. And most of the data that these algorithms need for training are in the hands of digital platforms. So I think this is going to be key and very important. In fact, you see the famous company on AI are associated in a way or another with digital, very important digital platforms, the usual name, almost one-to-one. There are many things to say on this. There are potential network effects that are specific to AI algorithms, to training. The better algorithm you have, this is a claim, it's called feedback loop issue. The more data you have, the better will be your algorithm through training on more data. The better, for example, will be the recommendation, and the more data you will collect from happy users. And then this has a feedback, potentially feedback loop that creates increasing return to scale for AI. Well, whether this is true or not, it's still debatable. In my research, I don't see a very significant impact of feedback loop. I see some of it, but not as significant as making it as priority in terms of riskiness in this market. And overall, I think, and I'll conclude, the industry ticks really many boxes of risk. Inputs, as I was saying before, upstream bottleneck, upstream vertical integration, downstream bundling, and platformization also to some extent. You have seen some business model of LLMs, algorithms that are going towards the direction of platformization. But I really want to leave some time for nasty questions from the audience, and I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Giacomo and Özlem. I think you made very interesting points, and you raised a number of questions, and we already have one question for you.
Okay, so Alan Riley, College of Europe. So my question is a bit of a kind of skeptical question here, because I was reading recently about Jim Covello's work. You know, he's the AI skeptic at Goldman Sachs, and he makes a number of points. He says, first of all, there's a huge amount of investment going in, and it's not particularly obvious that this is actually going to generate any revenues. There's a huge capital investment, no revenues. The second thing he says is that a huge amount, another major problem with this area is what you see as the more you get into it is actually the AI makes more and more mistakes. It becomes unreliable. And the third issue is the intellectual property rights, and there's a whole range of issues about that. And one of the questions about it is if you don't even take all of that on board, you do end up with a number of questions about, first of all, is the antitrust issue in part AI is simply a cover for actual collusion? So we say it's AI, but in fact, we're just price fixing. And the other issue, which I think is interesting from what you were saying, is that this issue about the ineffectiveness of AI, does that encourage an argument, particularly within critical pricing systems? Is that what you actually want is some degree of permission for them to operate, or some licensing process, not because of just as the fact that they may intentionally go price fix or create consumer harm, but they could create other harms which are because of their potential for actually not working as they're intended to do. That was my observation.
That's a small question, right? Okay, so we all know that AI hallucinates, they do it wrong in many different ways, but the point is the benchmark for comparison. The benchmark is humans. Humans are full of biases. Managers very often make mistakes. So I really think that, to be fair, in the analysis of what we can expect from AI, we have to be not what the computer scientists call oracle, which is the truth, but what humans do. And that's a material difference. Then the comparison becomes really on very equal ground as well. So there are many cases in which AI already has passed humans for many specific purpose. What we tend to have in mind is AI as a artificial general intelligence that is able to address many different tasks with the same model. First, we are not there, that's true. Second, we don't necessarily need to go there. If we have specific models that perform better than humans, that's going to be a material and consequential change, in my view. So, and one other example I gave you for pricing were, actually in those examples on implication for pricing, one was autonomous collusion, and the second was the learning trap. It's interesting because it's pointing to both of your points. Autonomous collusion is a case where we are sure that algorithms learn to do what they were instructed to do in the best way. Because if you read those algorithms' code, you would see few lines of code, and one says, maximize my profit. I'm a seller, maximize my profit. And the algorithm learned how to maximize the profit, colluding with another algorithm. So it perfectly learned what to do. The problem is that it's not complying with our rules. The second case, which is the learning trap, is a case in which we know that algorithms do not learn as expected, so in a sense it's a mistake, and they are stuck on high prices. Again, if you use the human benchmark, it's not obvious that this is not going to be a relevant issue still in the market, no? Because sellers are happy with high prices.
Over there.
Thank you. Thank you for the really valuable economic insights. I have a question that might sound rhetorical because it's from a lawyer's perspective. I was very interested to hear your conclusions from the first presentation about whether the outright ban of self-preferencing was indeed a good or a bad thing from a consumer perspective, and from what I understand is actually that we don't know the answer because we don't have enough data. So my question as a lawyer is, why did we need a regulation to impose this ban where we don't have enough economic evidence that it was justified? So I heard your question in the beginning of your presentation saying that there was a debate, and indeed there was, whether there should be a regulation like in the telecom, but I would like to point out that the situation is not the same, because in the telecom we had legal monopolies that were there because the legal framework was there, and the regulation came to open up the market and to take out the barriers that were imposed by law. And this is not the case in the digital sector, where normally, the market power that was gained by these players was by merit. And to link this to the competition topic, because we are here on a competition festival, is what is today the relevance of competition law to solve these issues? Because I think that it's, the conclusion that I get from your presentation, and it's my feeling as a lawyer, that you still need a case-by-case analysis, and the best way to do it is in a competition investigation, where you adduce economic evidence and show whether or not it's necessary. And I relate this to the second presentation, the point that you made about dynamic pricing, and we have a very recent example with the Ticketmaster case and the Oasis concert, where dynamic pricing was indeed a huge issue, and I think it was the CMA that immediately started an investigation, which shows that competition still has a role to play. So I'll end my rather comment or rhetoric question: do we still need regulation where there are so many unknown, and we still need so much case-by-case analysis? Thank you.
Shall I start? Okay. So again, very thoughtful and difficult question you're raising, but I think one thing we should look at, where do we come from? So why do we have such a regulation like DMA and DSA to start with? I think because it was a bit frustration of the agencies and the practitioners about impossibility or difficulties or lengthy cases involving digital platforms where the technology changes fast and the damages occur too fast and quantify fast, okay? I'm just, you know, we can think about many cases, but I think Google search is a shopping case, is a one great example of that. And resources. So agencies are frustrated, they don't have the deep pockets and they cannot show the proofs of all this, you know, the harm. On the other side, industry has enormous amount of resources. I think because of this asymmetry, regulation has become, you know, kind of a second best option rather than being the great solution for everything. When I said self-preferencing can have harm or benefits, and it's hard to define in practical terms, I just wanted to highlight necessity for data, okay? So that's why I'm hopeful that the regulation will enable academics to get access to data, because we have frameworks and methods to evaluate whether there's self-preferencing or not. I can control for all the characteristics of the product and see whether the rank cannot be explained by, you know, the reviews, other quality measures, and the history of prices, etc., whether I can see that there is a systematic bias for, say, Amazon-owned products versus the third-party product in the same market, right? But I need data to do that. And this is kind of a like, you know, we have methods. It's not impossible, but data. And who is going to do it? Who will spend money to do it? I think it is not fair to expect agencies to do it. So one advantage, in my opinion, of the regulations, changing burden of proof, the side, right? So now the big players have to prove that they are complying with the regulation. It's still tedious for the agencies to evaluate this compliance, but still it is less than doing everything yourself and your own resources and to showing the evidence of harm, right? So I think regulation, we shouldn't see it as a bad thing. We should just try to make it better over time, understanding better each market environment. And coming back to your question about whether we should regulate prices, my personal opinion is that this is the best way to go, even though this is, you think it is the competition for merits, but these are the markets so difficult to get competition back. Like we see Google search. Do you expect any competition against Google search? OpenAI was the best chance for Microsoft, has not materialized. So Microsoft Bing, which incorporates ChatGPT, has not get enough market share from Google search. So who is going to compete against Google search and break this dominance? In my opinion, we have to be very careful about the abuse of dominant power. And one way of doing it is the regulation. And regulation is, in my opinion, those commissions, in some cases, like commissions of marketplaces or commissions of app stores, could be actually abusive. And I think since we know we have the tools to do regulation of prices, maybe we might think about doing something that we know better than doing something we don't know. Again, this is not the first best, but better than the alternative previous world. Thank you.
Özlem.
Can I just add one point on, because there was a last part on AI regulation. So if we look what we have in Europe for AI regulation, the now famous AI Act, it says almost nothing about markets and competition. It's a risk-based regulation that tries to minimize or to make conditions so that the risk for fundamental human rights when AI populates our lives are minimized. That's the approach of the AI Act. Now, there are some parts, though, in the regulations like the DSA that are relevant to the to artificial intelligence. One is the sentence I read. But there are two very interesting tools, which are transparency and auditing. And I want to spend a few words on auditing the algorithms. If you think back what I said about the emergent properties that nobody knows, nobody can understand or anticipate, the fact that we have the ability to audit algorithms when they are deployed in markets, I think is going to be a necessity. Now, whether this is implemented through regulation like the DSA or through an antitrust case, we don't know yet what is the best way to go, but my view at this point is that certainly we have to be vigilant for the implication of AI in markets. And being vigilant can be done both with the regulation and competition and antitrust. And maybe those so-called special tools that were discussed some years ago and some authorities decided to endow with, which in my view, in the particular case of artificial intelligence, may be quite effective.
I think, unfortunately, we are run out of time, so I want to thank you again for your presentations.
Thank you.